What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast. Katie Mox and Will Brinson here. And as you know, it's our All 32 series, the series where we catch you up with insiders from every team and get you the information that you need ahead of the season. Today, we're covering the Houston Texans with sports anchor and reporter for KPRC2 Houston, covering the Texans, Ari Alexander. Ari, thank you so much for joining us today. How you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on. I think that this is maybe the most pro Texans podcast, or at least I'm like the most pro Texans person in the NFL media. Yeah, I'm not saying you don't like him. I'm just saying I for whatever reason am very high on the Texans this year, and people think I'm insane for it. So I'll ask you, Ari, am I insane for thinking that the Texans could be sneaky? I think I want to bet on the Texans to win the AFC South.
I think it's a good bet, and it's not necessarily because of that. I'm high on the Texans. I think they're going to surprise people and be better than just the general national trend of what people think they are. I think it's partially because the AFC South is so bad, and your schedule just isn't that hard. You're playing NFC South teams and AFC South teams for much of your season, and there's just a ton of winnable games there. And they were competitive in a bunch of games last year, and they have a better quarterback, assuming CJ Stroud starts.
All right, so let's get into the coaching. I'm a Niners girl, so I'm a big DeMeco Ryans fan. We miss him over here in San Francisco. But how does this new coaching staff already feel compared to the previous short-lived regimes in Houston? It seems like DeMeco's coming home to stay. How do you guys feel about it?
I think that the one word that would sum up how DeMeco Ryans has been taken in Houston is serious. And that's more of a reference to the fact that Lovie Smith and David Culley were sort of treated as unserious. So DeMeco has gotten buzz. People care. The season tickets are up, and doesn't matter what the season ends up as. Obviously, if they get blown out in a bunch of games, I think that tune changes. But right now, it feels like people are energized. They feel like they have, players have said this openly in interviews, we feel like we have a real coach. It's a little bit of a shot at Lovie Smith, who was not good last year. David Culley wasn't good the year before. Somehow Culley won more games than Lovie did, but it feels like the Texans finally have a guy that is at least shown respect throughout the rest of the league.
Yeah, I for sure. And it was you fire, it's 1 year, you fire Culley and Lovie after single years, and Lovie somehow cost him the number one overall. And this is the whole thing. It does feel, I like that approach. It's serious. That is, I think that's a good way to describe DeMeco. And I'm a big fan of his. I'm curious, when you think about who he brought over, Bobby Slowick, the OC passing game coordinator from the Niners. What do we think this offense will look like in terms of how they're going to operate? Because, the personnel is interesting, I guess, is a polite way of putting it.
I don't think there's going to be a lot of deep strike type of offense. Nico Collins is there for that, but he hasn't necessarily been able to stay very healthy. He also hasn't played consistently well at times. And then you look around the rest of the team, you have Robert Woods coming off a bad year. We know what he can do when he's good, but he wasn't, basically disappeared on the Titans last season. And then it's just a bunch of rookies, basically. So I think there's going to be a lot of underneath stuff. Hopefully Tank Dell for the Texans can break out, local kid here at UH. He works out here privately with the same trainer that works with CeeDee Lamb and Deebo Samuel. And when you watch him up close, I went to a training session with him and Jalen Waddle, and Tank Dell is very quick and shifty. He's working with 3 private trainers. So if anyone's going to win the offseason, I do extra work championship, it's Tank Dell. And he looks good in practice. So if there's a guy that can break out, maybe as a rookie, I like him. But if that's who you're relying on, that's not great. So this is where, for the fantasy people, I am so high on Dalton Schultz. You get slammed with Cowboy games year after year. It's not necessarily good or bad, but I just see the Cowboys too much because they're always
it's bad.
And for good reason. I'm just used to them on TV. And so you see more Dalton Schultz than you would ever want to see. And he's a good player. And I think that he might end up, especially early in the season, because of how much rookie quarterbacks, especially in that offense, rely on their tight ends. I would hammer Dalton Schultz over catches for the first 4 or 5 weeks.
Ooh. That's interesting. Okay, let's talk about who's throwing those passes to Dalton Schultz. You got CJ Stroud. Given the draft capital given up to acquire him in May, is he a stone cold lock for week 1, or what are your expectations for him in this first year?
I would say yes, but I think the Texans are going to not treat it that way. I think they're going to go into camp splitting reps for the most part. I think they want to see him have a good game in a preseason game, not just go out and look good in practice, have an area where he's allowed to make mistakes. I think they need to see it in a game, in game speed, even if it's the backups of, the Saints when they're playing in a preseason game. But I would fully expect CJ Stroud to be taking the first snap week 1. If you give up all that you gave up to get him and Will Anderson, got a new coach, trying to transform the franchise into a serious franchise, there is no way you can bring out Davis Mills week 1, even if they're playing the Ravens and that defense is good and you don't want to have CJ Stroud seeing ghosts week 1. I just don't think that you can have your fan base take you seriously and have Davis Mills start the first game.
Is there? It feels like it feels like the CJ Stroud pick. Like I feel like DeMeco Ryans and Casario, they're like, so this was the owner's pick, right? Like he made you guys take him. They're like, no, what are you talking about? We love him. Is that still the belief, sort of around the team? And like you're kind of, it's like, all right, you guys might like him, but I mean, like, have people bought into the idea that the organization was in lockstep with him?
I think that by now, with the good thing that's about CJ Stroud, off the field, and like when you watch him in interviews, and if you saw his like opening press conference with the Texans, he's really charismatic. And so whatever rumors or whatever stuff was going on, that there was argument between Casario and where McNair stepped in and said, hey, we got to have a quarterback, we got to sell tickets. No one talks about that here anymore. I think CJ has sort of won over the fan base and won over the radio guys and won everyone over just because like he's charismatic. He came out and he made jokes at the press conference and everyone seems to like him. And it's really good strategy on CJ Stroud's part because now he's going into training camp. He's going into these preseason games and there's no like, he's the number 2 quarterback behind Bryce Young or these guys didn't want him or what if, we should have gotten Will Levis or whatever. There's none of that. CJ's kind of gotten everyone to like him.
Well, that's good to know. It's so interesting because a lot of people thought that CJ was going to fall in the draft, including some people on this show. And then when he ends up going, number 2 overall, it was very, very interesting. Talking about the run game a little bit, you've got a defensive head coach in place. You got a first-time offensive coordinator. What should we expect for the split to be between Devin Singletary and Dameon Pierce, given the regime's history in a Kyle Shanahan offense? You've got to think that DeMeco saw what worked in San Francisco, is going to try to implement that a little bit here in Texas.
Yeah, I mean, I think Devin Singletary is going to get his touches, but Dameon Pierce is in, and I know it's not, might necessarily, from like a fantasy standpoint, might not be the best way to look at it, but Dameon Pierce is on a lot of the team's branding. And so I think that he's considered to be a big part of the future. Obviously, you look at the quarterback in Stroud, Laramie Tunsil with the big contract is considered to be a lot of the branding, which like the Texans are not in a great place when you're putting a left tackle on the season tickets. I think that Dameon Pierce is a guy that they do want to build around, especially early in the year when CJ Stroud is just getting his feet wet, just getting used to the offense. I think they are going to lean heavily on the run game. You're going to see some Devin Singletary, but I think there's going to be plenty of Dameon Pierce. And you got to keep in mind that Pierce is very fresh. He's a guy that didn't get enough carries in college. They kind of brought him along slowly last year, and then he ended up having the good season. I think there's going to be plenty enough carries for Dameon Pierce.
Yeah, I feel like maybe fantasy is a bad idea just because of the way that the history runs. But I mean, like, I feel like Pierce is kind of a little bit of buy low. Like I feel sort of cooled on him despite the way that he played. You mentioned Schultz and Woods and Noah Brown also on the team. So was the goal to give Jerry Jones FOMO every week with the various pass catchers?
Yeah, I don't know why. It was like like a couple weeks, so they're like, hey, they signed Noah Brown. Okay, yeah, I know who that is. They signed Dalton Schultz. Like, why are you rating? Oh, Malik Collins, ex-Cowboy. Like I'm trying to now run through like the rest of the team. Yeah, I don't know if it's just it's not Nick Casario because he's a Patriots guy, but I wonder if there's someone on the staff that this happens in baseball all the time where you have like a scout that's just like, all right, I like these guys, and so they just bring over their philosophy. And apparently the Cowboys had a bunch of these, like you mentioned, buy low candidates that they can just pull over. It seems to work sometimes because Malik Collins has been a really good player for the Texans. He's got an extension. So, yeah, maybe if CJ doesn't work out, they can grab Dak Prescott and bring CeeDee Lamb home. He's from here.
Imagine the Dak Prescott goes over. All right, we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're talking defense and Will Anderson's sack prop. It's pretty high. You're watching Pick Six. We'll be right back. All right, Ari, one of the biggest surprises, I think, of the draft was when the Texans moved up to the number 3 spot, grabbed Will Anderson. How much of an impact is he expected to have on defense? His sack total is set to 8, but that under is heavily juiced. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I like that just because there's not necessarily a guarantee that Will Anderson starts or that he's more, especially early in the season, he's more of a situational pass rusher because you look at what they have on defense already. Jerry Hughes had a really good season, at least the first half of the season, and then Jonathan Grenard had a good second half of the season. So you have some good defensive ends. Obviously, they need way more depth than they have. They signed Sheldon Rankins. They have Roy Lopez, who's okay. They have Malik Collins, who's kind of an underrated player. They have some guys on that defensive line. They lost Obo Okoronkwo, who had a good back half of the year. So the Browns now. So I think there's a role for Will Anderson, a fairly heavy one, but I don't know how heavy that role is early in the season. So if the sack total is 8, it's kind of a lot. I almost like so now I'm looking at the rookies of the year. So I was with Tyree Wilson the night before the draft when he got his jewelry done. So
really? That's awesome.
And Devin Witherspoon the day of the draft. I'm friends with their jeweler. So I'm looking at these odds here. Lucas
5-1. If you think he's not playing full time, then like 5-1 feels way too short to me.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just because he's the first defensive guy drafted off the board. I wouldn't go for that prop. I don't know how
you
much
take the under. You take the under on the total
the under on sacks. I wouldn't put him up for defensive rookie of the year. I don't like Jalen Carter at 5-1. I don't know if I like Devin Witherspoon because he's going to a team where last year they had a high profile cornerback as well. Like, let's get deeper. I want just the most.
Right, let's
get a defensive rookie of the year lock. Put it back up. Ari's going to give us a sleeper here.
Give me a deep sleeper. I don't like any of those picks there. Maybe Lucas Van Ness at 10-1, but
it's a weird defensive class just because it's like you don't have any of these like Anderson's like a stud, obviously, and Jalen Carter's a monster, but it's like none of these guys are necessarily just going to. You don't feel like there's somebody. I mean, there's going to be somebody who pops.
Maybe
obviously,
Christian Gonzalez. Where's Christian Gonzalez?
Ooh, Christian Gonzalez. I think like 10-1, maybe. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. I like him there. What do we got? Jack Campbell. So I'm an Iowa fan, so I love Jack Campbell, but
well, he's going to play early, right? Yeah. I think.
I could see Nolan Smith's not bad.
23-1 Troy Porter Jr. That's my
20-1 on Nolan Smith isn't too bad, especially he's going to be on a good team.
I like this. Will McDonald, 25-1.
Yeah,
the pass rusher. Maybe he comes out and blows up.
That's not bad.
We should just turn this into the defensive rookie of the year podcast.
I would go deep on this one. I'd throw a couple bucks on Mozzie Smith. Why not?
Yeah, I mean 30-1. Look, dude, somebody's going to surprise out of this with the way that top is shaken out. You mentioned some of those free agents that they brought in, like the defensive ones. It felt very Patriots-y, at least like when Belichick got to New England. And you sort of see how like he's always approached it by like, all right, like whenever he is trying to reboot a team, he tries to load up on like quality veterans. It feels like guys who are under the radar, and it felt similar to that in Houston. And when you add DeMeco to the mix, like I don't know, I think you can kind of squint your eyes and say this defense could be league average if everything clicks, right?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, their secondary is good. There's 2 position groups on the Texans that no one ever pays attention to that I think are good position groups around the league. One is the offensive line for the most part. You got 4 out of 5 guys that are, or at least 3 out of 5 that should be okay. Your tackles are good. Shaq Mason is solid. Don't know what you have in Kenyon Green at right guard. Had a bad rookie year last year. And then you're probably running out a rookie center in Juice Scruggs. The secondary is good. Jalen Petrie was excellent last year. Jalen Petrie is a guy that if you put up his stats last year's a rookie year against the rest of the rookies this year, he probably wins defensive rookie of the year. They signed Jimmy Ward, who's a good player. Their cornerback group is Derek Stingley, Desmond King, and Steve Nelson, who are all either solid or obviously Derek Stingley was a top pick and has the hype to end up eventually turning into a good player if he stays healthy. But Desmond King's a good slot corner. Steve Nelson is one of those guys that no casual fan ever thinks about, but the players know that he's a good player. And so, like, you have a good secondary. The linebacker group is a little bit of a concern. They added Denzel Perryman. He's out in the same gym working out with Tank Dell. You added Sheldon Rankins to your defense, and you had a bunch of defensive ends, the Jerry Hughes, John Grenard group, who had underrated seasons. Again, they're not big-name guys for the most part, or Jerry Hughes is generally considered to be past his prime, but they were solid. And so I think they had the worst run defense in the league last year. They had a good pass defense. So if you can just improve that run defense slightly, which I feel like a middle of Sheldon Rankins and Malik Collins, and now adding Denzel Perryman, if he can stay healthy. Christian Harris has another year to grow. You have a bunch of other linebackers to pick from. It can be a little better. I'm not saying they're going to be maybe top half of the league, but you can get them like 24th in run defense and then top 10 pass defense, which isn't out of the question. They can end up having a league average defense.
All right, let's talk about the team futures. You've already kind of proven to us you got a little degen in you, which we appreciate.
Yeah.
Odds to win the division 10-1, win total 6.5. Now, this podcast is very high on the Texans this year. No one higher on them than Will Brinson. He said multiple times that they will win the AFC South. He loves this at 10-1.
I said good. I didn't say will. But like I think the win total's moved up. What at 5.5? Am I crazy?
Brinson, don't walk it back now, Brinson. Don't walk it back now.
I'm already too deep on this Texans thing. It's a sad sight.
Yeah, I mean, I like that at 10-1 because look at why are the Titans plus 320? The Titans are bad. They went 3-2-1 in the division last year with Davis Mills as your quarterback and Lovie Smith as your coach. They had the best record in the division. They tied for the best record in the division with the Jags. Why? Or I think the Jags maybe went 4-2, but again, you went 3-2-1 in the division last year. Why are they suddenly supposed to be significantly worse than the Titans? The Titans aren't good. Yeah. So you're looking at these games. They play these teams 6 times. Why couldn't you go 5-1? You could split with the Jaguars. They've historically beaten the Jaguars. You could sweep the Titans. You could sweep the Colts. The Colts and the Titans are bad. All 3 of these teams, the Titans, Colts, and Texans, are all bad. It's all flop there. There's no, like, I don't look at the Titans roster and go, oh, yeah, Derrick Henry's going to run for 180 on him again. Like, with what? What do they have at quarterback? What do they have at? They just got DeAndre Hopkins, and that's it. Like,
as you point out, Robert Woods, like Tennessee's where Julio Jones is where receivers go to die these days.
Yeah, and then they have a few good players on defense, but their defense wasn't good last year. As much as like we're maybe looking at the Texans to be a team that could be slightly better than what expectation is like around the league. Like, the Titans are bad. They're really bad. Like, why? I don't understand why people think that they're a significant pick over the Colts to be third. All 3 of these teams are awful. I love at 10-1. I would absolutely hammer that.
Hammer it.
All right. Well, I mean, no one's going to complain about that on this podcast. I've been saying smash it for a while. I mean, I think if you like the 10-1 too, you kind of have to like the over 6.5 wins, right? Yeah. I mean, plus 120. Yeah. As you point out, like you have 4-2 in this division. And that means you're and look, you got a rookie quarterback. It could go south. The Texans haven't been good for a while. Like, they haven't been a great team for a hot minute. It could go south. Like, it's totally possible. But you have 4-2 or even 3-3 in this division, and you just got to win 3 or 4 more games outside of that to get the over, and you get into plus money. I love the over 6.5.
Well, that's when you're looking at, like, you look at the rest of the schedule, and it's not like it sets up difficultly. Like, yes, you're going to lose week 1 to the Ravens. And then you have a bunch of division games. You play the Falcons on the road, which is a winnable game. Like, Desmond Ridder is their quarterback. You play the Saints at home, which is, you could win that game, but probably not. You play the Panthers on the road, potentially a winnable game, depending on the quarterbacks there. You play the Bucks. Kyle Trask, who's from here, might be starting for the Bucks. You could win that game. You play the Cardinals. You could win that game. The Broncos were horrible last year. You could win that game. The Texans are hosting the Browns, and they have extra juice to take out Deshaun Watson. You could win that game. Like, there is potentially up to 9 wins on the board for me on the Texans. I don't think they get 9, but I see plenty of opportunities for them to get 7.
I love that, right? You are high on Dalton Schultz this year. His receiving yards set to 500.5. Are you hammering this over as well, Ari?
Yeah, I'm saving up to buy a house now. I would put all the house money. As long as Dalton Schultz doesn't get hurt, 500 yards. So we're Dalton Schultz get like 40 yards a game. Like, yes, Dalton Schultz.
It's actually if he plays all 17 games, that's under 30 yards a game.
Yeah,
Dalton
come on.
Schultz
What are we
is
doing here?
not going 2 catches and 28 yards a game, especially in this offense. And now they have like a clear tight end one, where the last few years it's been like Daniel Fells and Jordan Akins, and they've just throwing random guys out there. Like Schultz is your clear tight end one, over 500. And I don't like the 115, but I would take him if I can get like a modified prop. Give me 600 and 700. I would bet those on Dalton Schultz too.
I like it. I'm Schultz is somebody I'm definitely adding. The Dameon Pierce, 870 or in fantasy. I'm a big Dalton Schultz fan. I before this podcast, but now I'm a very big Dalton Schultz fan. Rushing touchdowns for Dameon Pierce, over under 5.5. The overs even money, which is a little surprising. Yes. Like they're going to feed the guy in the red zone, right, or down by the goal line.
Yes. What? That's it. 5.5. I know he didn't have a ton of touchdowns last year, but he also like didn't have all that much opportunity early in the year. Yeah, give me over 5.5. Like again, so we're looking at you need 6 touchdowns. Their offense isn't going to be that bad where they're like hurting to score 6 rushing touchdowns, and then you add like 3 or 4, like 10 for the year, right? Like yes, I would hammer over 5.5.
All right, one last question, just because the vibes are so high right now.
Let's go Texas Super Bowl bets incoming.
Regular season passing yards at 3,380.5.
Maybe under there. So that's where
okay.
And it's less than I don't necessarily not believe in CJ Stroud. It's just it's like a decent amount of yards. And then you look at his receiving core, and there are just so many questions there. Like I like Dalton Schultz. Like Dalton Schultz has proven to me over the years that he is a competent tight end. But you look at potentially washed Robert Woods. You have no idea what Nico Collins is yet. Rookie Tank Dell, rookie Xavier Hutchinson, whatever Noah Brown is, like
501 yards from Dalton Schultz.
Yeah, that's it. And right. Where are you getting the other 2880 from? Like that's a big number for. If they would have added DeAndre Hopkins, which wasn't ever going to happen, but if they would have added him, there's your clear number one receiver. Who's your number one receiver right now, other than Dalton Schultz? So I just don't see where you're getting almost 3,400 yards from CJ Stroud.
All right, so maybe a little bit of a trepidation there. If I've learned anything from this podcast, it is don't sleep on Dalton Schultz or the Texans' ability to win this year. Thank you so much to Ari Alexander. Stay tuned for more from our All 32 podcast with daily drops in your podcast feed and on YouTube. And make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to this video. If you're listening to audio only, do the same, like, comment, download, and tell your friends to listen and watch the pod. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much, Ari. You were a blast.
Thanks, Ari. That was great, man.